Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Kristen Don Hefner, and I am the Measure 110 Engagement and Strategy Manager at the Oregon Health Authority, and I will be assisting with facilitating today's media subcommittee. The Oversight and Accountability Council welcomes and encourages community input. Members of the public are invited to submit public comments or get on our interested parties email list by emailing oha.measure110@dhsoha.state.or.us. That email address and more information about the council can be found on the Measure 110 OAC website. OAC members have asked that OHA and other staff who are present in the meeting space introduce themselves in the chat. Please share your role with the agency, and if you are a subject matter expert, your area of expertise. I will now turn it over to Sydney to take attendance.
Hey everybody, I apologize, I'm off camera again due to bandwidth, apparent bandwidth issues, I'm not really sure. But hello, and when I say your name, if you could please say here for the record. Amy.
Here.
Hi Amy.
Hi.
Dharma, don't see Dharma yet. Keisha.
Here.
Hi Keisha. Melinda.
Here.
Hi Melinda. Morgan.
Here.
Hey Morgan.
Hi Sydney.
Hey Melinda. Onisha. I don't see Onisha yet. And Ron, I believe, is on the phone.
Here.
Hey Ron. And Zeb.
Present.
Hey Zeb. We have 6 present and 2 missing, and I'll keep watching in case they show up again. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Sydney. So today we are joined by Rob Cowie, who is our OHA Communications Director. Last month, this group asked several questions of us to kind of follow back up on in terms of media outreach and communications. And so Rob is here to assist with answering some of those questions. So Rob, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kristen. Yeah, happy to be here this afternoon. Glad to meet folks on the committee. And as I put in the chat, so my name is Rob Cowie. I'm the OHA Communications Director. I use he, him, his pronouns. And I oversee the communications team here at the agency. And yeah, happy to answer your questions about what we're doing to document the impact of Measure 110 and communicate the impact of burn programs and the work that's happening around the state to implement Measure 110 and expand access to services.
Thanks, Rob. Glad you can be here. So this is y'all's meeting, and I think I'll just turn it over to Keisha, who agreed to help facilitate, and you all to ask her questions, conversation. Turn it over to y'all.
All right. When I looked at the agenda, it said the update. So, is he going to be answering some of the questions that we already asked?
Yes, I'm happy to. So my understanding is I think we put together some slides that you reviewed at the last meeting, and I didn't have an opportunity to attend that meeting, but happy to be here and answer those questions. Kristen, I don't know if we have that slide deck, and maybe if it would be helpful for me to go through those slides again, or if there are specific things that
I think in our last meeting, we had some specific targeted questions that we needed answered. So I don't know if Kristen has that, or you haven't got to see that yet, but that's where we are.
Yeah, I have those questions that I can maybe just read out loud again to help shape that conversation, if that works.
That works for me.
Okay, let me see if I can pull them up real quick. So I think the first question is around a timeline for regularly scheduled kind of monthly, quarterly, or as needed press releases. And if OHA had a implementation kind of plan for when we would publish information regularly about Measure 110.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so Measure 110 is a critical priority for the agency, and it is one of our priorities for the communications team. We do have a couple of staff who are specifically responsible for supporting behavioral health, which includes Measure 110. And so we work with Kristen to make sure that as quarterly reports are coming forward, that we're raising the visibility of those reports, sending out news releases, and reporting on the work that the burns are telling us are happening in the community. We are also working to identify specific programs that are having an impact, looking for opportunities to show how the services and the programs that Measure 110 funds are expanding access to services in different communities, particularly focusing on communities of color. And we have, for one of our communications officers who's specifically responsible for Measure 110, we have monthly goals for how many stories that we are hopeful that he will be able to tell and elevate in different ways, whether it's through a video or through a news release or through other channels. We do have, at the Health Authority, we have a number of different channels that we use to communicate with communities around the state. In addition to news releases and kind of traditional media, we have our social media platforms. We have Spanish language programming. We have a regular Noticia segment that we produce each week that focuses on key health issues that is in Spanish, and we've used to share the impact of Measure 110. And then we have a weekly newsletter, Oregon Health News, that initially started during the pandemic. If you sign up for it, you may remember it as the coronavirus update. That was a daily publication, and as we've moved out of the pandemic, we've shifted to a weekly publication, and it focuses on a broader range of health issues now, including Measure 110 and substance use services and behavioral health. That newsletter has a subscription of over 185,000 people, which, as far as I know, actually is the largest circulation of any publication in the state. So we have a broad reach, and we are looking for opportunities to talk about the impact of Measure 110, with our various audiences and through those different pathways.
And just to add to that, I think we are definitely, publishing quarterly data. There is a lag as our team validates it. So kind of I think I can expect a regular cadence of at the end of each quarter, kind of publishing a new overview of services and expenditures and stories, and updating that dashboard that we published over the summer, earlier this summer. So I think that is definitely a cadence that people can hopefully come to expect and look forward to as we can continue to collect stories and information from all of the Measure 110 providers who are doing great things.
Are there any follow-up questions to what he just stated?
Well,
Yeah,
Lakeisha, if I,
one.
oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had one, which is, so you mentioned a number of things, but my question would be, where would we see those press releases and stories?
Yeah, I mean, they're on our website. They're also on our social media feeds, our Facebook page and our Twitter feed. And then, as I talked about, our Spanish language Facebook page, OHA en Español, and the Noticias program that we post there. And then, right, through stories in statewide media, both in English and Spanish. Folks want to, we can, pull that coverage and, and share with you some of the stories that we have posted on, our various platforms, and also, worked with media around the state to tell. So yeah, happy to provide those examples if you haven't seen those already. I mean, those are the primary pathways that we're reaching people.
And that includes the Oregonian and Lund Report, Willamette Week.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And was somebody about to add something?
Well, I guess, Lakeisha, if I could, I mean, I think one thing that I know, our team would appreciate, is more visibility and awareness about what different programs are doing at the local level. I think we also see, like, a lot of success when we can really localize a story, and and rather than blasting out a news release statewide, that we can reach out to local media and share with them information about services that local program is providing in their community. It's a lot more relevant, a lot more direct. The quarterly reports that Kristen talked about, I think, have been really valuable, and I think particularly the last round, I think we did see a lot of pickup among media statewide, and sharing those results, talking about progress, talking about increasing number of people accessing services. That was all accurate. I think we were really glad to see that accurate representation of what's happening in the community. And I think we can continue to expand that coverage. If we have more information about different things that are happening on the ground, data is really important, right? Like, we want to document the impact of Measure 110, and we know that that impact also happens in different ways. And if it's an individual story about a person who I'm just gonna sort of think out loud, but someone maybe, right, who was struggling with a substance use disorder, maybe accessed harm reduction services, and then as a result, became interested in treatment, engaged in treatment, maybe also got connected to housing, and other support services, peer supports, stories that really can help illustrate the continuum of services that Measure 110 is funding, can help tell the story about why Measure 110 services are filling critically important gaps within the existing and traditional substance use service continuum. And then, how Measure 110 is making a difference, how that person may be doing right now. So, that's just like one example. I mean, I think, profiles of people working in burn programs, that's another way to tell the story. Unique approaches, populations who, have traditionally had less access or due to systemic racism, have been excluded from, equitable levels of care. I mean, those are all different themes and story elements that, are relevant to people. Obviously, there's a lot of focus on Measure 110 right now. And, that's an opportunity to help people understand what Measure 110 is and how the services that it's funding are making a difference for people in local communities, and then and talking about the work that is happening all around the state to implement it.
A quick question: do you have a way to get like printed materials out?
That's a good question. I think so. We have not formalized a distribution system during the pandemic. I will say that we worked very closely with CBOs around the state to share information, to get information out like digitally, through social media, providing toolkits to CBO partners so that they could then share health information to their social media audiences. We did do some, production of collateral and fact sheets and signs and, information for vaccination clinics and things like that. I think more of it was digital. We don't have that infrastructure built in a similar way for Measure 110 and for burn programs, but I think that's an opportunity that I think we can explore. And again, I think it's a model that served the state of Oregon really well during the pandemic and really helped get information out to people in the community who really needed it.
Yeah, because a lot of this information, it seems like is like hidden. Like all these sites you're talking about, I haven't even seen any of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just wondering if we can get like printed materials, maybe to like clinics and recovery centers, and get them out there. They could be going in for one reason and pick it up and get to the next level of care, but a way that it's like readily available to all who are not technologically inclined, or different ways of communication.
Yeah, I mean, I think another thing that worked really well during the pandemic is that through our Safe and Strong campaign, we worked with Brain Communications, and again, they provided really important COVID-19 prevention information and information about vaccines and vaccine availability. They also did office hours on a regular basis where they had staff available, and community-based partners could come in and say, we're communicating information about vaccines, and people are having, this question about, reproductive health. How do vaccines affect, my ability to have kids? Things like that. Can you advise us on how to communicate that information? Can you help us put together a fact sheet for our community? You're translating information into 13 languages, but in our community, we have a specific language group whose needs aren't being addressed, and can you help us with that, right? So I think, we could also look at doing something similar. I mean, if this group thinks that burn partners would be interested in this, we could also look at doing something, where we're meeting with burn partners and, and providing that kind of, communications technical support, if that would be helpful.
And I just want to add, I see your hand, Zed, that our new phone line contractor, who I believe we're hoping to introduce to you all at a full council meeting in the near future, is planning on providing various printed materials for community partners and for our burn partners, with the hotline number and, you know, how to access kind of at least the hotline. So I think, you know, we are looking at, and we'll bring those to you all once they get put together. But I think that that is kind of another strategy, Keisha, that we have heard from you all and from partners, and are going to be trying to work into the phone line, if not kind of a bigger, I think, campaign and educational materials.
Go ahead, Zeb.
Thank you. I just want to kind of talk about the way information is received these days, like through social media. What I'm seeing a lot is are headlines, measure when 10 doesn't work. I see, like, you know, and then like you dive into the article and it's using statistics that were actually used to get measure 110 voted in. They're using like old statistics. But the headline is what does the, you know, causes people the perception that measure 110 doesn't work. You know what I mean? So like, you know, there's financial interest from some movements. So maybe we're fighting an uphill battle in terms of utilizing social media to get the positive stuff about measure 110 out, because it, you know, seems like, you know, it's being saturated. And part of that is just the way that culture exists today, and social media is. I'm just wondering, like, you know, do we have to think outside the box, or do we have to, I mean, how do we get the positive news out there, like popping up on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, like the negative stories are? And maybe we're just, you know, I don't know what the answer to that is, but that is, I mean, headlines, it's a really polarizing topic, and it's, you know, I just see it a lot of misinformation out there. But it's unfortunate the damage is done when the headlines are stating something that's not accurate. But anyway, just want to say that.
No, thanks, Deb. I think that's exactly right. We just did a quick you know, coverage analysis of Measure 110 over the past 6 months. I asked one of my team to pull the farthest reaching stories, so the stories that, you know, had the biggest circulation or the widest viewership or listenership, and then also do you know, a sentiment analysis. So the, you know, our media tracking tool will look at, is the coverage you know, positive, negative, or neutral based on keywords. I mean, it's a blunt instrument. I will say it's a pretty coarse filter, you know, the way that sentiment is calculated. But you know, I will say, like, you know, at a high level, you know, it's you know, it paints a picture. And for Measure 110, the picture it painted is, you know, about 45% of the coverage was neutral, about 45% of the coverage was negative, and then the remaining coverage was positive. So there's a pretty dramatic imbalance there between the positive and the negative. And you're right, it, you know, we exist, you know, we live in a time of like incredible media fragmentation. We live in a time when you know, for better or worse, you know, outlets track their numbers, and they you know, are looking at the number of people who are, you know, clicking on a certain story. And that shapes the tone of coverage sometimes. And that's a challenge in reality. And then you're right, outside of traditional media, there's social media where we know, the algorithms really are driven by engagement. And engagement means clicks and reactions and comments. And and what gets elevated is often stories that talk about complex and important issues, but in ways that are designed to really generate people's emotional response rather than a thoughtful response. So that poses a lot of barriers for us, to communicate about the impact that Measure 110 is having, but it doesn't mean that we still can't talk about what's happening and reach people. And I think there's a lot of ways that can be done. We talked a little bit about, right, just if there's information that you're seeing about burn programs, we do at OHA, I mean, our job is to communicate accurately about initiatives that the agency is working with community partners to carry out, right? So Measure 110 is a big priority, and we can communicate the impact of what's happening through the various channels that we have that do have tremendous reach. And and that is an important part of our role. And it's a good way for Measure 110 partners to, if they can provide us that information, we can work together to make that information available. And that's one way. The other way is, as we've been talking about, if we are successful in telling those stories, whether through traditional media or through our own platforms, sharing them, burn partners are welcome to share that information and cascade it through their social accounts. And then partners in their community can then also cascade it to their colleagues, their friends, other people in the community. That's another way to give a more accurate picture of what's happening with Measure 110, longer legs, and reach more people. And then I guess I would say to this group, I mean, you're all really engaged in Measure 110 and in communications, and you have the ability to call reporters or go to your local newspaper's editorial board or write an op-ed. I would absolutely encourage you to use your voice to talk about what's happening and why Measure 110 is important.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Ron again. I just wanted to circle back because I'm looking here on the press release website under Measure 110, and there's in 2023, it looks like there's 3 articles. Combined Measure 110 providers served more than 60,000 people in February. Then in May, Measure 110 oversight terminates grant for non-compliance. And then in June, Measure 110 report shows gains in clients served across every service area statewide. So those are the only 3 that are in news releases on the website. Are there more that I'm missing?
Yeah, so we've talked about Measure 110 through the newsletter and on social media. And again, I'm happy to to pull those articles and get them back to you. And I think there's a lot more that we can do. I think one of the messages that we've been communicating is that Measure 110, it's too soon to evaluate the impact of Measure 110. That Measure 110 is really just getting up and running, right? All the burns, received funding. All burns received funding, as of fall of last year, right? And even now, many of the programs are still standing up services, right? So we are not at the point of full implementation, and so yeah, I think, as we get more information about what's happening, then we can tell that story more consistently. I mean, I will say, we respond to questions about Measure 110 almost every day from media. Yesterday, Ebony Clark, our behavioral health director, did an interview with the New Yorker about Measure 110. So we continue to field questions both from local media and national media. And again, I think, we've seen that, a lot of that coverage has been really critical of Measure 110. And, we're also, we have seen, there's an NPR story, we'll see how the New Yorker story turns out. But I think there are also stories that, there was a recent Nation story that told, a more complicated picture and a more balanced picture. And, as programs are delivering more services, more people are getting care, and housing and peer support services, there will be more opportunities to elevate what's happening with Measure 110. But yes, I mean, I think, Ron, to your point, I mean, we have been focused through news releases on, kind of reporting events, news hooks, like what are the big milestones in the implementation of Measure 110.
And Zeb, I see your hand, but I just want to make, I'm wondering, Rob, if you can also maybe speak to how, Measure 110 is a piece of our kind of larger behavioral health system. And
And
it's
then I had a
increasing
quick comment
access.
too.
Okay, yeah. I see. And how this is kind of how we're talking about this within kind of the bigger context. But maybe I'll let Zeb go and then you can get to that.
You go, Zeb, and then I'll go.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering, maybe we're doing this already, but I was wondering if it was within our scope here to give like bullet points to recipients of Measure 110, like here's where you can access the positive stories or the data that's coming out, repost on your social media site. We encourage the stories of success. Here's a template, a way to present that. Is that something that, I mean, is realistic or something that can be done? I mean, like you said, we have people out there that can also advocate out there who have been helped by this stuff. Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, Zeb, if you're asking me, I think it's absolutely possible. We always welcome those stories. Recently, for the Oregon Health News, our editor, asked for stories about recovery, and got some really powerful stories. As Kristen said, we're talking. It's a priority for us to communicate about Measure 110, but we're also talking about larger behavioral health system changes. And then, in that context, talking about Measure 110 as one of the critical components of expanding access to services and addressing substance use. So we do talk about Measure 110 in other ways than specifically Measure 110. And, and we're always interested in yes, telling stories of recovery and how services are having an impact, recognizing that programs may be Measure 110 funded and get, funding through other ways. So, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, definitely if the committee wants to put out a call and you get a response and and people come forward and want to talk, we would welcome that. I think, we also want to be sensitive to stigma, and just make sure that someone's fully providing their consent to sharing their story, just be thoughtful about that. But I think that the voices of people who've been served the Measure One programs is going to be powerful, and people need to hear those voices. And we're happy to work with the committee in figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, my comment is, I'm just wondering how we can kind of get a handle on the way Measure 110 is viewed. Yeah, we're not in full implementation, but there has been a lot of work done and many success stories to this date. And I'm just wondering if you can work with like the burn partners and the CBOs to send you those stories. As evidenced by town hall yesterday, it was a whole lot of missed messages. And I don't know where people are getting their information, but it's many different places. And we need to try to keep steering it in one accord and really highlighting the impact that Measure 110 is having, not continuously talking about we're not fully implemented. Yeah, we're not fully implemented yet, but we have had this many success stories, or like people sending a weekly success story from the burns, of someone,
Mhm.
and really
Yeah.
highlighting that newsletter and targeting our county commissioners, our city council folks. I heard a lot of them, and their messages were really kind of detached from Measure 110. And so like really, getting people on one accord. And by the polls, like over 70% are ready to repeal it already. And so we need to take back the narrative and show how impactful Measure 110 has been in saving lives.
Mhm.
And Jackie, I see a hand up. Jackie.
Thanks, Lakeisha. Yeah, and if I haven't met you, if I haven't had the opportunity, my name's Jackie Fabric. I'm the Behavioral Health Deputy Director. And Lakeisha, what you just said really aligns with, I think, some of the conversations that we've been having. Is how, we get all this really wonderful qualitative data that we're sharing in the dashboards. And how do we build on those stories to show the successes that Measure 110 is having in local communities, and to build on that. Also thinking about how, as Kristen was mentioning earlier, how the burns are part of the behavioral health system now, and highlighting things like how Measure 110 has increased access to treatment, I don't have the dashboard in front of me, but I'm picturing it. There's all these different areas that we're showing through the qualitative and quantitative data that we're receiving. And so I think it's a prime opportunity that we can take and looking at that information, really having it focused in the data and connecting that back to specific providers and communities and telling those success stories about how Measure 110 has really how it saved lives, it's increased access to services, and not just in one part of the state, but throughout the state.
Thank you for that. Amy has a hand up too, or is it? Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Thank you. So when you were saying how we could get that message across about what Ballot Measure 110's doing for people or how it's affecting communities, you know how people go on websites and they have like short video clips of the changes that are happening in people's lives because of Ballot Measure 110? Like, little short stories from 6 people that have been, like, we go and we find somebody who engaged in services and has changed their lives, or that, hey, I never even had hope before, and now I have hope, and I've reduced my use in half, or just, a little story about what changed in their lives due to the Ballot Measure 110.
Mhm.
What if we did something like that?
I think that's a fantastic idea. And that's something, like, quite honestly, you don't need I mean, you don't need, us to put in our newsletter or send out a news release, right? I mean, like people going on to TikTok or Instagram and sharing their stories and, and directly communicating to their friends, their family, having their friends and their family share that. I mean, that's something that, is like, that can be incredibly powerful and it doesn't require us putting out a news release to communicate.
Well, I mean, it doesn't require a news release, but even if we were to say, if you want more information on the quality of care from ballot measure 110, please see da 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 da. And
Right.
then, and it doesn't have to be like TikTok or anything like that. Like it could even be, I don't know if we could put it on the ballot measure 110 website, a link, a link to successful outcomes.
Yeah.
And create a link where they could go and they can like, oh my God, look at that story. I mean, if ballot measure 110 had been around when I started my journey, they would see, broken face person on the floor, dead to their disease, to now I'm a professional counselor, things that changed in my life because things were made available to me. But with ballot measure 110, even more so, persons that had never had opportunity before are now seeing opportunity to, hey, this might really be something here. Like I have hope again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And it reminds me, folks may remember back in 2017, the Trump administration attempted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. And at the time, we worked with Governor Brown's office and community partners, and we had a website called 95% Oregon, and it referenced the 95% health coverage that we had in the state at the time, which was a product of the Affordable Care Act. And we had a story bank. We had a map of the state, and we had exactly what you just described. We had testimonials from people all around the state. I think we had some videos, but they were, primarily, people took pictures of themselves, submitted their stories, and people talked about the impact that health coverage made in their lives. And it was a really powerful complement to all the data that we also were sharing. And I think what you're talking about is that we could do something like that with Measure 110, along with the dashboard that Kristen referenced. We could also share some of those individual personal stories that put a face to the data.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that would be good. And I see your hand, Morgan. Because even there are some organizations putting little videos like on their websites, but if people don't know how to go search for that certain organization, they're missing the whole story. So I do think it should be in a central place on our Measure 110 website. And then Morgan.
Yeah, it doesn't, those things don't require press releases or whatnot, but they do require time and resources. So like I've made a couple of these TikToks. I went to CORE in Eugene. I went to Max's mission in Medford and showcased some of the services that they were doing and put them on my TikTok. But I think like what Keisha just said, if there was some centralized area where we could collect various people doing that, and of course you can vet them to some degree, but where there's links on OHA, that's just sort of like perpetually my question is like, what are we allowed to do? Is any content that we create, any media that we create, can that be hosted on the OHA website or linked out to officially? Because I think the testimonial idea is great.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Yeah.
I'm looking here at the OHA Twitter, formerly known as Twitter. And there's a lot here, but, and so as Morgan was talking and Amy was talking, I said, well, couldn't we post here?
On Twitter?
Yeah, positive stories and like Morgan's visits and stuff like that. Can it go here?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes. I mean, as a state agency, yeah, what we need to steer clear of, and what our channels should steer clear of, would be specific, electoral advocacy, or yeah, I like, if let's say, there's a repeal initiative that qualifies for the ballot, that I think we would be reluctant to host a video on one of our social media platforms where someone says, "Oh, vote against the repeal initiative," right? Because as a state agency, that goes beyond the scope of our role. I mean, that goes into advocacy. It also means that, if we're opening our channels to, one perspective on a ballot initiative, and, then we have to open our channels to everyone with a perspective on an electoral issue. So, so we would want to avoid that. But for someone to say, I live in Klamath County, and here's my story about how Measure 110 saved my life, or saved the life of my friend or family member, and just talked about the impact that the services made for them. There is no issue with that, and we would welcome it and be happy to post it.
For example, here on August 24th, Recovery Works Northwest recently cut the ribbon on an alcohol and drug withdrawal management facility made possible through Measure 110 funding. The center is expected to serve as many as 1,200 people, and it's been seen by more than 2,500 people.
Yep.
And so pushing out much more of that is kind of, I think, what we're saying.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's absolutely right. And I think we can do more of that. I think, again, what really helps us is to hear from you, right? I was talking with someone, and they wanted to share their experience, and then putting that person in touch with us, or here's what is happening in our community. A program just opened, or thanks to Measure 110 funding, a program just added the ability to add 50 new beds, or treat 200 more people a year,
Right.
and have someone talk about that. Like that's ideal.
So I think that's where we've been, where our stance has been at this whole time. I don't know why we got sidetracked with politics, but we have been here and talking about sharing success stories and how Measure 110 has impacted lives. And Morgan, I think you had a comment to jump in on too.
Oh, yeah. Just based on so what would like the workflow be? So if we have content, we have a story to share, how do we raise that up? Because yesterday at the town hall, listening to that Portland police officer talk, I wanted to share the anecdote so bad, because when I was in Eugene at that peer drop-in center, I watched a law enforcement officer drive a guy and his dog there so that he could get connected to services. Like, I watched a Eugene PD cop do that, and it was incredible. And like, I don't know, that seems like a pretty relevant story, instead of just treating everything with handcuffs.
Mm-hmm.
We can now connect people to services.
Mm-hmm.
So, or whether it's that or other testimonials, how do we get that into the workflow, into OHA comms officially?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Tim Heider is our communications officer who supports behavioral health and works on Measure 110. I can put his contact information into the chat. I mean, I think this has been really, good conversation. I think, I can also go back and sit down with Tim. I think, we could look at, setting up maybe some regular office hours like we did with COVID and the COVID CBOs. So that, and then working with all of you to share that information with burn partners, so that, people could come and just, we'd have an hour, every couple of weeks or, once a month, and people could say, here's some of the stories, here's the contact information of a family that wants to share their experience. And then, that would give us the opportunity to then follow up and collect those stories and then get it up. And I like the idea of building, a page around the data dashboard where we're highlighting those stories. I think, we can come back to this group and talk about what that might look like and, how we go about building a page like that.
And I just want to jump in and say we are going to have that page, such a page on our latest Q3 dashboard that will be published very soon. So we will have a page that captures several stories kind of by various categories. And those will be published on our dashboard and updated quarterly.
Thank you. And I see Jackie's hand as time is dwindling down. And I had a quick question in the chat, like how soon can we begin to see these communications and stories up?
Well, I think it goes back to Morgan's question about workflow, right? I mean, I think, we have the channels and we want to tell the stories and, right. We've been working with Kristen around the quarterly, data releases. We're responding to media questions. We have, as Britt Perry knows, we've produced some videos highlighting the work of different programs. But I think, for us, we are ready, willing, and able, and we need connection to the people who want to tell their stories. So, maybe what we can do is come back to this group and sort of build out more of that workflow. But in the meantime, I would say, I'll put Tim's contact information in the chat and feel free to flag for him any stories that you're aware of that you think, there would be, public interest in and would help tell the story about how Measure 110 is making a difference.
Thank you. Jackie, did you not have nothing?
Oh, I know we're at the end of time, and that's what I was just going to talk about, was just making sure that we have a process in place so that we can start getting these stories out there. And I'm kind of hearing OHA can be part of this. This can also be done at the provider level too. So I think there's lots of opportunity. But I know we're at time, so I'll hand it over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. This has been a good discussion. It sounds like we have a few follow-up items. Morgan, I think, is interested in seeing the media analysis. Rob, is that something we're able to share?
Sure.
Okay. And we can also share Tim's contact information to folks. I don't want to keep people over, so does this group want to also meet next month to maybe kind of review this summary and workflow if we put something together to kind of take a look at? I think, in that month you'll get to see kind of some of the updates we've made to the dashboard and stories, and you can let us know if we're trending in the right direction with some of those or not. That sound?
Yeah, I think we definitely need to meet next month, but if we can get those stories and things to communication sooner, so when we come back, it's a full dashboard with stories that we can review, that would be good.
Awesome. Okay. Before we say goodbye, does anyone want to volunteer to kind of help facilitate next month? If not, we can ask for email volunteers closer to.
What date is next month on? Sorry.
Oh, no, that's a good question. I probably should have led with that, right? I think it would be October 18th, right, Sydney? I'm seeing Carly nod.
Yes.
Okay.
October 18th.
Okay. I can't fully commit at this moment, so we'll have to, I might be able to, so maybe the email way is a better way, because if nobody else wants to do it, I'll do it, but I just got to check on my mom because she's in the nursing home, so.
All right. We will
Yeah,
follow up with email.
Okay, yeah, I might be able to, or I might have to slide to a conference that day, so just follow up. If Amy can't, I might be able to.
Yeah. So let's just follow up through email so we can release people
Okay.
to their day.
So thank you, Rob, for being here. Thank you all for
Yep.
being here. Appreciate this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we will see you all next week for the full council meeting.